head into a soft economy, the biggest question is how much money and productivity are mismanaged contracts costing us as an organization? So if you look at some of these stats, these are bottlenecks that some businesses experience due to contracts. As you can see here, reported by the World CC, 3.4 weeks of average contract life cycle, meaning that when you send it to legal for review, on average, it's 3 to 4 weeks. I've seen this go from a couple of weeks all the way up to 8 weeks in very large contracts or very large transactions like an acquisition, many months, right? So legal, not necessarily, they're being a bottleneck, but they're a necessary evil. Like you don't want to conduct business without some type of legal review. So contracts becomes the bottleneck or becomes the byproduct of that necessary evil. 15% reported by KPMG of orgs say that legal is the bottleneck. And we can see that. You can see that when you're in your organization. So when it comes to contracts, they're very complex. They can be very simple, but even the simple ones don't necessarily solve the problem because the question is, does it have all the necessary disclaimers and claims and assumptions built in to make sure both parties are protected? 29% of the workforce touches contracts. This is going to depend on what type of industry you're in. If you are like in recruiting, contracts are flying left and right. If you're in the financial industry, contracts are flying left and right. So this 29% may be a lot higher for those industries. So you have more people involved with trying to get a contract reviewed or reviewing the contract or trying to put in add items to a contract, compose these contracts as you conduct business with vendors, suppliers, clients, subcontractors, you name it. 30% of the workday is searching for contracts. We have contracts in the organization scattered all over the place. If you're on Microsoft 365, this could be a problem, but the good news is on 365, this could be an easy win to solve that problem because most of the documents, especially if you're in 365, SharePoint in the cloud, Teams, OneDrive, whatever the case may be, most of that data is already indexed. So identifying that data where it's fragmented and putting together a project or an effort to centralize everything, usually under legal's purview, would be one of the steps. So we talk about how these AI agents can help assist with that. Because finding the document is one thing, but cracking open the document and reviewing it and classifying it and sensitivity label tagging it and extracting all the needed metadata is where the AI really comes, because that's the human capital. Searching for, this is what we're used to now. There's no knock because the way we used to do business prior to AI needs to be reimagined, and our mindset shift needs to happen to say, okay, where can we leverage AI to get this work done that was usually a human laborsome task? For example of that, so I say all that to say, looking at a document, looking at its name, the file name of the document, or maybe the folder structure of where that document is stored is not enough to effectively identify these fragmented contracts across the organization. Deloitte reported 30%, less than 30% have a centralized post-signature contract management, right? And this is really just what is your standard operating procedure for managing these contracts so that way you can identify when, they're set to auto renew, identify what regulatory requirements you must adhere to. All the contracts, for example, where you may have a renewable energy regulatory requirement on what you can and cannot do. Or maybe the feds come back and say, okay, if you're conducting XYZ, or if you have these clauses, you need to respond by this, or now you need to shift the way you do business to X, right? Identifying which contracts or which projects adhere to that you're already signed, that's a bottleneck. And that's actually a leak that we see across organizations. The larger the I was going to say the larger the organization, the bigger the problem. Is actually the more contracts you're managing, the bigger the problem. So let's look at what does this cost you as an organization with mismanaged contracts. On media, the total legal spend is about 3.1 million. Of course, this is going to fluctuate. For those that may be very heavy in contracts, this is going to be a lot higher. For those that may use baseline contracts or maybe have a legal team for other parts of their business, this may be on par or this may be a little bit smaller. But again, this is real money. This is 3.1 of your gross revenue that goes to the cost of legal. And this could be because you're dealing with a lot of contracts, you got a large legal team. I'm not saying that this is going to go to zero and you don't need any legal, but are you really spending this money effectively, especially if this next one, 90% of the execs see a better need for contracts. Now, the reason why they see a better need, there's a need for better contracts, is because they've been through the battle. They've been through legal breaches. They've been through conflict with major vendors on a project. They've been through gaps in their contracts where they had to absorb the cost of the mishap or the misstep. So from that experience, from that battle, now their antlers are always up when they're looking at contracts or when contracts are being under review to make sure certain things are accounted for, like cyber breaches, data breaches, or things along those lines. Here's another one, 21 million, this is reported by Zylo, 21 million of SaaS is waste. And part of this is not getting in front of the renewable of the contract. Some of these contracts you sign, you earmark a certain number of licenses and this is all projected. So then once you get into the actual, you realize, okay, we projected we needed 1,000 licenses. And once we got into the actual work, we only actually needed 400 of those. Okay, and that was commitment. So you had to buy those up front. The issue is now this is going to be an auto renew every 12 months or every 6 months or every 18 months, whatever the contract terms are. So not monitoring this, and you have a bunch of these floating around the organization, this is where money starts to leak out of your organization. And let's talk about breaches. Data breaches, the cost of a data breach is 4.8 on average, 4.8 million as reported by IBM. Now, again, contracts don't have anything to do that your data got breached, right? You need to lock that up and have better data management within your organization. The key is when you analyze this, when you do your retrospective, what was the root cause of that data breach? Now, if it was the fault of a vendor or a supplier, this is where you want to look to recoup some of that money, because now you can say, no, you're responsible for this based on this audit report. This is where the data breach happened, and that was your area of expertise or your area of ownership. Because you don't have that in the contract, you can't hold their feet to the fire. It's happened to their insurance, right? We all have this certificate of insurance, of a certificate of insured to make sure that we are one of the insured of our vendors and our suppliers. But if you don't have the contract to identify and make them held accountable, this is where you absorb that cost. So back up to this 90%. This is why the antlers are up for executives that have been burnt or been through this battle-tested situation, that they be looking for things like this as clauses within the contract. And 90% say contracts are hard to find. Again, and we mentioned this before. You can have an organization to where this is fragmented. Everyone's not following the policies and the procedures. So how do you be more proactive than reactive in this scenario? So this is what a contract looks like once managed with this AI agent and SharePoint. Again, this is what we're leveraging the power of Microsoft 365, what you already have. Azure AI Foundry is going to bring in the AI component to this. These power agents is going to fuse the two. And we love this model because we can get to building these solutions for businesses right away. And these are proven techniques and proven strategies, because 80% of what we're building, we already have in the skill set within our engineers, because we've been doing this for the past 4, 5, 6, 7 years. Not building AI agents, but building automation on the Power Platform. The 20% that's missing is the AI agent, and this is an example of how you fuse the two. So here we got all of these contracts stored in a contract library, right? So imagine that there was one effort we helped out with. This was an acquisition. They acquired this company, and through this acquisition, this company was going to bring over 600,000 contracts, and they were just all in one boatload. And the challenge was we need to sift through these contracts, one, to see which one of these are active, which one of these are high risk, what type of contract is it? Is this a lease agreement for a car, for an office building? Is it a non-disclosure agreement we have with one of our suppliers or vendors or subs? Is it an office lease? Is it a partnership agreement? What exactly are we dealing with here? So with those 600,000, the goal was dump this into a SharePoint library. One, because we need versioning, we need a centralized place. Again, 90% of the clients or organization complain they can't find contracts. You need a centralized place. Of course, this is not going to be open to everyone. You're going to have the right security, the right governance, the right access control to contracts that are relevant to them, but you need a centralized place to do it. And I'm not saying one document library. This could be a site with many libraries, but it's centralized and everyone in the organization knows where to go to get access to these. So here, you got the risk level. This is going to vary. The appetite of the risk depends on many different factors, right? When we do these workshops, we unearth that. What industry are we in? Based on this industry, what regulatory requirements do you have to adhere to? What is your, from an organization perspective and legal requirement perspective from your legal team, what regulatory risk level or tolerance do we want to encounter, right? And based on, and this will fluctuate against different contract types. So this risk level is done by the AI. What the AI is going to do is going to read this document. There's an agent that does the risk level assessment, and it comes back with a risk score. And then from that risk score, it gives you a reason. You can see this in the risk description. Let me zoom in here. You can see in this risk description why it gave a medium score versus this one, why it gave it a low score, so on and so forth. So here it has the contract type. It's not looking at the file name to determine the type. It's actually reading the document. In the event the file is mislabeled, maybe the file may have contract 001.pdf. Not helpful at anyone, right? You got to crack these things open. You got to read it. This is what the agent does. It reads the contract, it labels it, and we give it a finite list of where we want it to label, right? We don't give it this is going to be in the prompt. So in the prompt for the contracting type agent that reads the documentation and determine the type, we give it a list of, it's going to be this type or undetermined, right? So that way we can easily categorize it. So you want the ability to come in here and group these contracts by type, right? Collapse them and say, okay, these are all my service agreement. These are all my non-disclosures. These are all my that, right? So having that ability of a finite type list gives you that flexibility. So now we got the risk disclaimer. We talked about that. When is the start date of these contracts, right? Because maybe from a data management, you may have record retention policies, right? And that record retention schedule may start at the start of the contract or the created date of the contract or the last modified day of the contract, right? So this is going to give you a date for your retention, your records management to where you can manage these effectively. What are the end dates? What is the auto renew? Are these set to auto renew? Let me filter all my auto renew contracts here at the top by selecting yes. So now I have all these under my purview and a vision that says these are auto renew. Again, the AI read these contracts, and it could be one page, it could be 500 pages. The AI doesn't care. It's going to comb through these and look for different flags and data points that you train it to do, that we're going to train it for you to do. What is the termination period, right? So if you want to prevent this from auto renewing, these are critical, right? Because, and again, this is where you start to leverage Microsoft 365, because what we would set up is that, okay, this is set to auto renew. Based on this termination period, this needs to be reviewed or acted on 30 days before the contract end date. And we're going to get people in front of this 60 days before this happened, 45 days before this happened. If there's no movement on this, right, because we're going to monitor the modified date, review date, and if this is completed or whatever the case may be, we're going to escalate the notification. Hey, this thing is coming up. No one touched it. We have 45 days before we need to act on this. Do we want this to auto renew? Someone please review these terms and conditions, these clauses, to make sure this contract is relevant for the way we're conducting work in today's market. Again, so all of this but all these metadata pieces get extracted. These are just handful, and these are going to vary from organization to organization. We realize that. So we're positioned to add in any requirement that's needed for managing contracts, what metadata is needed for this to work and flow, what reminders and review periods are needed that need to happen. Understanding that review periods are not the same for every contract type. Some review periods may be more aggressive based on the contract type. Some review periods may be a little bit more lenient based on the contract type, so on and so forth. And the risk level, right? Which one of these are high risk? I need to bubble these up to the top. So let me group by the risk level at a bird's eye view. This is going to give me how many medium I have, how many high I have, or whatever the case may be, right? Again, getting to these answers, building the process, automating the process around this is going to be critical. Where does the AI agent play in here? As you've seen before, it's going to be cracking open these documents, reading these documents, adhering to the business logic and rules that may be in place for your organization, and creating the metadata, the description, the risk score, the flags for auto renew, and then back into, and be supplemented with workflow processes, review processes that you already have with, for example, Power Automate, right? And then what review team needs to review these. And that could be on many, we've seen this from all kind of logic and process requirements, from very simple, okay, first step, always send it to this admin. That email notification can be a lot smarter now with AI, right? We're so used to just sending a blanket, hey, this contract needs to be reviewed. Here's a link to the review, and maybe key in some key data points. We can get smarter with that now with AI. When we send that email notification, this contract needs to be reviewed. These are the risk areas, and these are the items to pay attention to. And that's unique per contract file. It's a different game now, being very helpful for the legal team. These are where the workshops we have with the legal team, we unearth those requirements. Where you spend a lot of your time as a legal professional reviewing these contracts. Oh, we got to do X, we got to do Y, we got to do 1, 2, 3. And if it's this, we need to do step 1. If it's this, we need to do step 9, wherever the case may be. We're building in workflows, review processes, layered with AI to help combat that. Again, the stats are telling. If leveraging AI to streamline that process, leveraging AI to do things that were more labor intensive before, leveraging AI to unclog some of these bottlenecks, leveraging AI to those who are in the middle of the intersection, being more helpful and giving them more information up front to where they can make a human judgment call based on their professional background and what it needs to be X, Y, Z, and then move it to 1, 2, 3. So this is how an AI agent, contracting agent, can improve your business process in 2025.